Monitorama. How we doing? Welcome to Portland. I'm Paige Cruz, Senior Developer Advocate at Chronosphere, and what I think I'm the youngest retired SRE in the business. We can talk about that. So, raise your hand. Do you see your first monitoring tool up on the slide here? There we go. All right, a good handful of you. Me too. Mine might not be yours. Mine was New Relic. And last question, raise your hand if you agree with the statement, chasing a single pane of glass is a fool's errand. Where are my people at? This talk is for you. Those of you not raising your hand, we will check in at the end. This talk is about how my experience in the biz has led me to really believe that there is no one-size-fits-all tool for observability that can flex to everybody's needs. And a little bit about how I'm shaped differently than some of my seasoned ops pals. I say I was a baby dev, born in a Docker container, shipped to an EC2 instance that was provisioned by Terraform. Like, I grew up in the middle of the cloud complexity, the microservices explosion, kind of walked into tech as all of that was blooming. And I've been on both sides of the vendor-client relationship, not once, not twice, but many times. So I think I'm bringing kind of a grounded view that's not just big monitoring's point of view. Started at New Relic as a vendor, then left New Relic to pop over, follow my friends at Envision, got the heck out of the design industry, ran back to monitoring with Lightstep, following my love of distributed tracing. I really thought tracing was going to be the signal to end everything else, and we would never look back. And here we are, like 6 years later, and it's still not mainstream. And I was like, you know what? I got to take a break. I'll pop over to the cannabis industry, see what's cooking there. And finally, come back to my love, monitoring and observability land at Chronosphere. So I know we can be a skeptical bunch, us technical folks, but I hope you can see I'm not coming from just a vendor's point of view. I have felt the pain of monitoring migrations, training people on new tools, futzing my way through different query languages. Oh my God, I know the pain that exists. And I'm here to talk about a specific type of pain, and that is chasing the single pane of glass, which for this talk, we will define as the one observability and monitoring tool to rule them all, the one that your company says, this is it, all eggs in this basket. This will provide the insights we need from our system. North, south, east, west, we'll never need another tool. This is it. But if you, like I, have embarked on a monitoring migration in the last few years, tried to increase the observability of your system, or just tried to train people on all the different telemetry formats that exist, you know this is a painful, painful journey. And I posit that this journey is not one that we all need to take. And in fact, it's not one that most of us should be taking. So let's get into sort of the arguments against chasing the single pane of glass. The first is tool sprawl. A lot of us feel, oh my God, there are too many tools, from Slack to my CI/CD system to source code. Like, we are clicking between so many windows and tabs, it can be very cognitively overwhelming. And I get that. However, everywhere I went after New Relic, of course, developers and operators use totally different tools. My developer friends were using the beautiful enterprise application monitoring suites, and my operator friends were all in Prometheus and Grafana dashboards, and I thought, this is the problem. This is what we need to solve. We need to consolidate. Everyone needs to be looking at the same data in the same tool. How else can we collaborate? And I thought, it's Prometheus I've got to kill. I've got to rip that out of my ops friends' hands. And I also, as I learned about Prometheus, I thought, oh my God, why would you run your own stack? Why does Prometheus let you choose your scrape interval? That is just asking for statistical nightmares. And I really, really believed that we needed to all converge on one tool. And then I grew up a little bit. I opened my ears and I listened to my ops friends, and they said, look, the ecosystem's here, the community's here. This is how we get visibility into the monstrosity that is Kubernetes. We've got dashboards out of the box. There's all these beautiful default metrics. Like, look, this is our bread and butter. Good luck taking it from our hands. And I thought, well, there's no way I'm getting the developers like all in on Prometheus, so like, what do we do about two different roles using two different systems ostensibly to monitor and observe the same system? Like, isn't this still a problem? What about tool sprawl? Is it okay that we have different roles using different tools? And I had to totally change my paradigm last year when I read Catchpoint's 2023 SRE report. And they just straight up asked, is tool sprawl a problem for your company? And the majority, 59.1% of respondents said, nope, not really, or only a tiny bit. And I was like, what? They're wrong. The folks at Catchpoint are wrong, there's no way. And I looked closer and I read the paragraph that accompanied the chart, and it said, look, the question that you ask is not how many tools, but are those tools that you have providing value? And if the net sum of all the tools you have is making people productive and happy and they're able to do their jobs, you don't have a problem with tool sprawl. You're doing just fine. The problem is when you've got tools that are underutilized, that don't fit your needs, or maybe were for a previous architecture or something. So I really had to sit and meditate on this and be like, okay, it's really not the number of tools, even though that's what I feel like is the problem, because they brought the data. I had to change my mind there. And I get it. I don't think that multiple tools, like having 10 different tools, I'm not advocating for that. And in fact, while working at a company, when I was interviewing at Lightstep, they were like, hey, you're a customer of ours. How's tracing going? How do you like it? And that was my face, that whole question, or that whole conversation. I said, I am the monitoring maven, because spoiler, when you work at one monitoring company, forever, you are forever the expert no matter where you go. So I was in charge of switching vendors and consolidating, I was knee deep in our company's monitoring stack, and had no idea that tracing, my true love, was already in part of our system. And so I had to really think, God, you may not be able to get from a single individual contributor's point of view, you may not know all the tools that are running around your company or people stealthily installed somewhere. And what if we could embrace this idea of multiple monitoring and observability tools? What if we could say, together, Dev, you look at what you need to at the app layer, Ops, you look at what you need to for the infra layer for tools that are purpose-specific, built for those parts of the stack, and we could use those together and collaborate to understand our system health. What if? And so the second point, which I think is a real easy sell for this crowd, is that open source instrumentation is the way, the truth, the light. It is how we free ourselves from the walled garden of proprietary closed instrumentation, which makes it a huge pain to switch between vendors or even feel like you have control and agency over your own telemetry data. And we'll rewind a few years. Before OpenTelemetry kind of crashed onto the scene, if someone told me we were going to consolidate vendors, choose a new one, XYZ, I was like, great, I'm gonna be Sisyphus, I'm gonna be the one that's championing this, I'm gonna be becoming a forensic accountant to understand why the bill spiked. I just saw pain and misery going to the new thing versus just keeping the old thing running. And then I followed OpenTelemetry's beautiful birth into the observability scene. And not to be that guy, but I was into it when it was open tracing and open census. I have been with OTel for a while. And I used to think the power of it was tracing. Tracing for you, tracing for you. Everybody gets a trace, we're all gonna be happy, bing, bang, bong, we're done. And then I kept seeing talks about this little OTel collector and how magical it was that instead of tying itself to just the OpenTelemetry OTLP format, they were like, we're gonna take your prom metrics. We're gonna take your ECS elastic formatted logs. We're not just OTel, we're gonna take in all signals. And I thought that is a powerful point of view. And I do a lot of talking at conferences. And this year alone, I've had 2 conference talks, one by Adobe, who talked about how they use the OTel collector to get, I'm not gonna say a single pane of glass, but to get one perspective on how much telemetry was getting sent, the volume of the different signals, and it gave them sort of a control plane over the data that they had. Why was this a big issue for them, or why was this a big benefit? Well, they acquire companies, and I don't know if you've ever tried to integrate an acquired company into your own stack, but people are quite opinionated about the tools they use, don't often want to switch them, and so the OTel collector was their way to manage that control and visibility while letting everybody bring their own stack and tools. The other one was Pluto TV, who said, we were in the business, we were looking for new observability vendors. We popped in the OTel collector, and as soon as we wanted to do a head-to-head or apples-to-apples comparison, it was a config change to say, send it to this destination, and this one. What used to be weeks of misery of trying to figure out how to route the different telemetry types at what time, or trying to look at the build to estimate how much the new tool was going to be, and always knowing it was going to be pretty wrong. The OTel collector kind of came in and said, look, let me be sort of the load balancer for your telemetry traffic. And I thought, that is the power of open telemetry. It's not just that traces are coming to the party, but the collector is giving you control over your own data. And there's a lot of benefits with the walled garden. This is where I grew up. Install this agent, we do everything for you. Like I mentioned, my horror at the scrape intervals, proprietary agents kind of did all that math for you and figured it out. But it made the cost of switching basically prohibitive. You were just locked in to that one system forever, no matter how much they wanted to charge you, no matter how much they were lagging in features and productivity suites, you're kind of stuck with them. But what if you joined the open source world and you had a community, you had an ecosystem, you had training you didn't have to build from scratch, documentation that you could just import into whatever docs tool you use. The power of open source instrumentation is also freeing us from having to learn every specific format. And I will just say, OpenTelemetry is doing very great with the documentation as well. I will give Prometheus its flowers. I have been reading through the docs, and I'm happy that there is so much for me to catch up on. And so when I think about open source instrumentation, it's not just the library that you're bringing in, right? At this point, it's not just bring in statsd, bring in the OTel library, bring in whatever Prometheus library. It's about that whole, I think we're calling it the telemetry pipeline, the Ollie pipeline. You can tell me later, but it's controlling that whole path of the data from instrumentation to emitting to you decide how you want to process, filter, drop, aggregate, and then send to different backends. That is all decisions that you should be making as the owners of this data, because they affect the data fidelity that you have. It affects the cost at the end of the day, something we all have to be conscious of. And so it's really about taking ownership over your data and freeing yourself from being tied to a specific vendor or a specific format. And the sad, sad truth, the bubble bursting moment for me leaving New Relic was that nobody thinks about monitoring as much as us, the people watching the live stream, hello, and the people watching this recording. I totally drank the Kool-Aid. I was like, everybody gets software's eating the world, monitoring and observability, that's the only way to understand, handle, scale these systems. Leadership knows it, directors know it, ICs know it, this is an area that is totally invested in at every org in the way that I expect. No. When I got to my first SRE role, I realized as I talked to people and as I tried to audit what signals were we sending to where, that people on the whole treated monitoring and observability as an afterthought and as this sort of annoying chore they had to do if SRE team yelled at them. Instead of the thing that helps you on call and the thing that lets you spend more time with your kids, your friends, and your family. And I was like, whoa, the thing I've spent my whole career dedicated to is a tiny blip on some engineer's consciousness. And when we talk about chasing the single pane of glass, moving and consolidating to one tool, there's a lot of people you have to educate along the way who may be very tied to their tool for specific reasons, or may just have other priorities. It may not be a top priority for your organization, team, or department to be chasing whatever new tool it is. And yeah, so you can have only so many priorities, and is consolidating just for the sake of getting the single pane of glass really going to give you the value for the massive labor that it takes, even with the open telemetry collector letting you shift traffic around, now you've got to think about how do you get all your monitors over? How do you get your dashboards? Are the formats going to be the same? Like, how do I train everybody on this new UX and style of work? And oh yeah, you're going to have to listen to so many complaints about how this tool didn't do what the other tool did that was their favorite, and they're so upset even though they never filled out the form that you sent at the beginning of the process. Like, lots of opinions in this space. And so I'm not advocating for all of the tools, siloing your data, islands of knowledge, because today we've got a better way through. It is linking your telemetry together, even if it lives in different tools. We've got so many options now, from baggage, thank you to the W3C. It is not necessarily distributed tracing specific, but baggage is a way to pass context around between requests, to pass something like maybe a user ID that originates in one authentication service, all the way down to, I don't know, the database call or something else that is downstream or upstream. You can send data through, maybe across like an API call to a third-party service. Like, we can get visibility across components that we weren't able to before without proprietary instrumentation. So if you haven't checked out W3C baggage, look at the spec, it's pretty awesome. The other thing is, basically all vendors have realized the power of linking at this point and give you a dashboard chart or widget that you can enter text in. What you can do with that, of course, is up to you and your org, but I recommend adding links to your logs that are pre-formatted queries scoped to the service of the dashboard that you're looking at. Dear God, please don't just link to your random, like, here's the log query bar that's empty. The power is in being able to hop from tool to tool, carrying the scoped context query like with you. Because, like we said before, different roles live in different tools. And I'm like not gonna spend 3 hours learning, the one I've avoided is Kibana query language, sorry, Elastic. But if I were investigating something, got to whatever formatted log query that I needed to for whatever component I was investigating, found an issue, boom, I can send that log link to somebody else and it jumpstarts their investigation so much faster. Didn't have to know that other tool, I was just following the breadcrumbs as they existed. The other part is logs. If you've got tracing, you can enrich your logs with the span ID or the trace ID, which means that you can go from looking at some funky log line over to a beautiful visualization of a trace waterfall or looking at a histogram of aggregated traces. The power these days is in the relationship between our components in the system, the relationships that we can embed in between the different types of telemetry. So it doesn't matter what tool is your favorite or whatever, if you can follow the breadcrumbs to where you need to go, like that is what we're trying to do here as a whole, is understand our system, what went wrong and where, and not waste a bunch of time consolidating and taking on those big projects. So, what are like some goals? Like we've got this problem, you probably have multiple tools already, you may not be convinced by the messaging so far, but like what are we ultimately trying to do here as an industry is the ability to go from, hey, my service alerted, my service is this car, I can only see what's straight ahead of me and maybe what's straight behind me. I know there's a problem because I'm waiting and my brake is on, but I can't see what it is. So to go from this view to like helicopter in the sky, I can see lots of requests, I can see the system more as a whole. I can see where that queuing started. And oh, if I'm looking at aggregated traces, maybe I click into a trace. Oh my God, a dog on the freeway. I mean, obviously our examples are different, but like the ability to go from services point of view to system point of view down into a specific service interaction, that ability to zoom in and out of the system, that is what you need your suite of monitoring and observability tools to provide for you. And if you are struggling with that process, or investigations take a long time, or you dread writing after incident reports because it is such a laborious task to investigate and just spit out a timeline of what happened, then you need to increase the observability of your system. And it doesn't mean shoehorning in to whatever tool you already have. You may want to bring in a new tool. But this is what we want to do. We want to let operators and developers zoom in, zoom out, and understand their system, no matter if they're looking at logs, traces, or metrics, because they can hop in between the different types. And for those who love a summary slide, here's how we live in a multi-tool world. Figure out if your tools are providing value. Please cut the ones that aren't. I don't know if you have access to like the MAUs and the DAOs, monthly active users, daily active users, but if like one team is using a tool, they should either teach everybody else how to use it, or you should figure out if it's really providing the value that you think. The next one is actually owning your telemetry. And that is owning what we're calling, I think, the pipeline from instrumentation and emitting, giving you the power to tune, drop, aggregate, filter, process, scrub out those like PII and the logs. All of that is business context configuration that you should be in control of. And the way to do that, open source instrumentation, Prometheus, Grafana, and friends, open telemetry. Then you want to link all your signals together with as helpful of links as you can provide with like pre-filled data, or if you've ever used GoLinks. GoLinks are awesome for quick log queries. And like ultimately embrace all of the signals, all of them, that you need to get the fidelity for you to be able to troubleshoot your system effectively. That is our goal. That is what this suite of tools should be doing for you. And I truly don't think there's one tool that is going to nail all of these things for a data scientist, for a DevOps infrastructure engineer, for an application developer, for a mobile developer. These are all really different components, and you're probably better off with purpose-specific tooling or really limited platforms that focus on doing a few things really well instead of trying to be everything to everyone. And so, with that, you can come see me if you want to talk about this talk. If you're like, nope, I've got the one tool to rule them all, and you want to make your case. If you're like, what's up with tracing and OTel? I'm curious. I'd like to sprinkle some of that in my system. Come find me for the rest of the day. I'll be upstairs at the Chronosphere booth, and I love, love, love talking about this stuff. So, with that, I will open the floor up if you've got questions.
Awesome. We've got some time for some questions. Any questions from the audience? We've got one right here.
You referenced GoLinks, and I wasn't sure what you meant.
Sorry?
I think you referenced GoLinks just a minute
Oh.
ago. I wasn't sure what you meant.
Yes, so GoLinks is like this URL hacking tool where you can type go / and then you can set up like logs and then tie logs to CloudWatch or Elastic, whatever you're using for your log backend. And then if that system allows you to like play with the query in the URL, what I would do is say go /log /service name /production and go right there. So as an SRE, I wasn't privy to all the intimate details of every application, didn't want to have to hunt it down. So having that kind of central place to just be like, what's up with the logs of this service? What's up with the logs of this environment? Was super helpful, especially if you've got multiple tools.
Awesome. Any other questions from the audience? Check up at the top. I think. All right, another big round of applause for Paige.